everyone, and welcome to the SEforALL side event called Financing Energy Access and Economic Recovery in a Climate Smart Way, organized in collaboration with the Rockefeller Foundation, the IKEA Foundation, and the International Finance Corporation. This side event is part of the Ministerial Thematic Forums taking place this week, which play a crucial role towards the high-level dialogue on energy happening on 20th September 2021. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are logging from. My name is Sonal, anchor and senior research analyst at CNBC TV 18, and I'll be your host for the next 1 hour. Thank you so much for joining us today, where we hope to provide an opportunity for everyone to learn, engage, and be inspired and energized. Over the next hour, you will be hearing from eminent guests about how to access reliable, renewably powered energy that is key to global growth and recovery and to the resilience of communities grappling with the dual crisis of COVID-19 and climate change. We will discuss how energy is the key to unlocking new pathways to create sustainable, equitable, more prosperous future that is climate resilient. The Rockefeller Foundation, the IKEA Foundation, SEforALL, and the International Finance Corporation are mobilizing a new community of investors and climate finance for low-income and emerging countries to lift millions of people out of energy poverty. This event will unpack recent major investment and partnership announcements with the leadership from each organization. As you enjoy these talks, we encourage you to share your thoughts on social media using hashtag HLDE2021 or hashtag SDG7BeBold. Before we start, we would like to thank SEforALL funders, especially the IKEA Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation and the governments of Iceland and Austria. Now, we have a lot of ground to cover up, so let's jump right in. And it is my pleasure to introduce our first eminent guest who will deliver the welcoming remarks. Damilola Ogunbi, the CEO and Special Representative of the UN Secretary General for Sustainable Energy for All and co-chair of UN Energy. If you don't know her yet, she's a force to reckon with when it comes to passionately advocating for sustainable energy and believes that no one should be left behind. Damilola.
Thank you so much, Sana. I'd like to thank all our panelists, Raj, Per, and Makta, who I consider to be value partners and who are equally passionate in the commitment to achieving SDG7 by 2030 and our climate goals by 2050. Their efforts are very clear with the high-level dialogue. Their institutions have been key in terms of our technical working groups and given us important insights into the reports that were launched on Friday. These reports are important because they provide the foundation and the roadmap to 2030. In addition to major announcements, which I'm sure we'll discuss in this session, I know these institutions will reflect on their bold ambitions as they work towards their energy compact. I'd like to take the opportunity to acknowledge the tremendous progress we've all made on energy compact. These actions are very, very critical as we know we are far behind reaching our goals of universal access by 2030. I am optimistic we're going to get there, especially with partners like this and these three amazing people I have with me here today. I'm sure that we all have the power to mobilize more like-minded institutions that have the resources to truly leave no one behind by 2030. I'm going to hand over back to you, Sona. Sorry.
Thank you so much, Damilola, for your inspiring words and actions and for emphasizing a crucial point that we tend to forget, that renewable energy is the key to climate change as well. But before we start this interesting discussion, let's learn a little bit more about how IKEA Foundation has helped millions to achieve this goal of renewable energy and to fight climate change.
ಹೆಣ್ಮಕ್ಳಿಂತ್ರ ಏನು ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಮಾಡಕ್ ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಬಹಳಷ್ಟು ಜನ ಮಾತಾಡಾರು. ಆದ್ರೆ ನಾ ಮಾಡಿ ತೋರಿಸ್ಬೇಕಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಛಲ ಹುಟ್ಟಿದ್ದು. ನನ್ನ ಹೆಸರು ಸ್ಫೂರ್ತಿ. ನಮ್ಮ ದೇಶದ ಎಲ್ಲಾ ಹೆಣ್ಣು ಮಕ್ಕಳು ನಿರ್ಭಯದಿಂದ ಓಡಾಡಬೇಕು. ಅದರಿಂದ ಉದ್ಯೋಗವಂತರು ಆಗ್ತಾರೆ ಮತ್ತು ವಿದ್ಯಾವಂತರು ಆಗ್ತಾರೆ ಅನ್ನೋದು ನನ್ನ ಕನಸು.
The IKEA Foundation is committed to empowering low-income communities around the world with renewable energy. They support the Selco Foundation, an organization that enables hundreds of thousands of children, families, and young women to make brighter futures for themselves. One of these young women is Spurti Kutagi.
ನಮ್ಮ ಮೊದಲು ನಾವು ಸೋರು ಮನ್ಯಾಗಿದ್ದು ಅವಾಗ ನಮ್ಮ ಮಮ್ಮಿಗೆ ಹೊಲದ ಬ್ಯಾಕ್ ಪೇನ್ ಮತ್ತು ಹೊಟ್ಟೆ ನೋವು ಬಂದಿತ್ತು. ಅವಾಗ ಸಿಚುವೇಶನ್ದೊಳಗ ಆರಾಮಿಲ್ಲ ಅನ್ನಂತಲೇ ನಾ ಅವ್ರು ಹೊಲ್ದಿರ್ಕಿಲ್ಲ, ₹1 ಇರಾಕಿಲ್ಲ, ಒಂದು ತುತ್ತು ಕೂಳಿಗೂ ಫ್ರೀ ಆಗಿದ್ದು ಅನ್ನಂತಲೇ ₹1 ಇರಾಕಿಲ್ಲ. ನಾ ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋದು ನನಗ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡಾಕ ಆಗ್ತಿರ್ಕಿಲ್ಲ. ನಾನು ಮುಂದೆ ಏನ್ ಭವಿಷ್ಯ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಿರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಮತ್ತೊಬ್ರು ಸರ್ ನಮ್ಮ ಮನೆಗೆ ಬಂದ ಹಿಂಗ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಮಿಷನ್ಗೆ ಸೆಲ್ಕೋ ಸೋಲಾರ್ ಮಿಷನ್ ಅಳವಡಿಸಿದ್ರ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಇಂಪ್ರೂವ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಆಗ್ತಿರಿ, ನಿಮ್ದು ಅದರಿಂದ ಸಹಾಯ ಆಗ್ತದೆ ನಿಮಗ ಅಂತ ಕೇಳಿದಕ್ಕೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಮಮ್ಮಿ
Through innovation, design, and with the participation of local rural communities, the SELCO Foundation makes renewable energy that is cleaner, easier, and quicker to access, more affordable and more inclusive for families who have little or no access to electricity. Energy gives people power, but renewable energy gives families a future.
ಆರಾಮ್ ಬರ್ಬರ್ತಾ ಹೊಲ್ಯಾಕ್ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು ಅವರು. ಅದರಿಂದ ಎಲ್ಲ ಲೋನು ಮುಟ್ಸಿರು. ಈಗ ಲೀಸ್ನೊಳಗೆ ತಗೊಂಡೀವಿ, ಈಗ ಆರಾಮಾಗಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಲೈಟ್ ಅಟ್ಯಾಚ್ ಮಾಡೋಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಮೊದಲ ನಮ್ಮ ಲೈಟ್ ಭಾಳ ಹೋಗ್ತಿದ್ದು ಮತ್ತು ಅಭ್ಯಾಸ ಮಾಡಕ್ಕೆ ಅನುಕೂಲ ಆಗ್ತಿರ್ಕಿಲ್ಲ. ಈಗ ಲೈಟ್ ಹಾಕ್ಸಿದ್ಮೇಲೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಫ್ರೆಂಡ್ಸ್ ಸದ್ಯಕ್ಕೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಮನೆಗೆ ಬಂದು ಹೋಮ್ವರ್ಕ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರು. ಹೆಣ್ಮಕ್ಳು ಮನಸ್ಸು ಮಾಡಿರ ಬೇಕಾದನ್ನ ಇಡೀ ಜಗತ್ತನ್ನ ಗೆಲ್ಬಹುದು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ನನ್ನ ತಾಯಿ ನನಗೆ ಹೇಳಿಕೊಟ್ಟಾಳು. ನಾನು ಒಂದ್ ಉದಾಹರಣೆಯಾಗಿ ನಾನು ನಿಲ್ತೀನಿ, ಇಡೀ ಜಗತ್ತಿಗೆ ನಾ ಉದಾಹರಣೆಯಾಗಿ ನಿಲ್ತೀನಿ.
The IKEA Foundation brings hope to families, young people, and vulnerable children around the world. They support partners that empower people in low-income communities to create sustainable livelihoods and tackle climate change to ensure that there is a livable planet for future generations.
Okay, all right. Such inspiring words. Energy gives power, but renewable energy, that is something that gives us future. So we'll discuss this further, and it is now time to welcome back Damilola Ogunbi, who's the CEO and Special Representative of the UN Secretary General for Sustainable Energy for All and co-chair of UN Energy. Now, I would also like to introduce our eminent guests who will join us on these important discussions. First, Dr. Rajiv Shah, who serves as president of the Rockefeller Foundation, a global institution with a mission to promote the well-being of humanity around the world. Then Per Hegenes, who is CEO of the IKEA Foundation. Since becoming the foundation's CEO in 2009, Hegenes has presided over the foundation's evolution into a global grant-making philanthropy that funds programs in more than 45 countries. Last but not the least, Makta Diop, who is the Managing Director and Executive Vice President of the International Finance Corporation. He assumed this position on 1st of March 2021. A very heartfelt welcome to all, and I'm really looking forward to spending the next hour at your side. All right, then, we'll start the first segment of the event, and that will allow us to dive into transformational partnerships. Okay, all right. I would like to start with you first, Raj. The Rockefeller Foundation has had some bold new partnership announcements recently. Can you tell us a little more about these collaborations and joint investments? What are you hoping to achieve?
Well, thank you, Sonal, and it's great to be with Damilola and Per and Makhtar in a partnership and collaboration that is intending to end energy poverty around the world. You know, that video of the IKEA Foundation's important work illustrates how critical it is that everybody have access to electricity and energy and the ability to lift themselves up the economic ladder of human well-being and welfare. And we know that in this period of time, with COVID-19 still ravaging many parts of the world, and with a great divergence taking hold where wealthier countries are recovering quickly and less wealthy nations, frankly, are recovering much more slowly, we know that we're going to lose decades of progress against the Sustainable Development Goals if we don't do something dramatic. And so that's why we've all come together to announce this collaboration. Primarily, the IKEA Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation will make $1 billion commitment to move 1 billion people out of energy poverty, and to do so in a manner that leverages commercial and development investment finance from the IFC and so many other partners all around the world. So we have seen success on the ground, as you noted in that video, and we believe that there's a pathway forward where 1 billion plus people can lift themselves up by having access to distributed renewable energy. And this partnership is all about delivering on that result for our common humanity.
Okay, that is very interesting, Raj, and we will discuss this further in our upcoming discussions. Let me come to you now, Per. In this morning's ministerial session, you spoke about IKEA Foundation's mission to invest in a new global platform that will revolutionize energy access and climate action in emerging economies worldwide. What kind of partnerships will be required for the kind of impact that you plan to achieve?
Well, thank you, Sonal. Raj just described a partnership, which is really about bringing as many organizations in the private sector, in the public sector, in the financial sector together to actually collaborate, because we believe that with unprecedented collaboration, we can create so much more, so much quicker. And in this initiative, we are not only trying to bring energy to 1 billion people and enable 1 billion people to a better life, and doing that in a way that it's not only the private life and the day-to-day life, but it's also the productive life that helps really generate job opportunities and therefore increased family income for all these families. So that's one side of it. But the beauty of this program is also that we have another very important side of it, and that is that we are aiming to, trying to, with this program, reduce and avoid about 1 billion tons of carbon. And given where we are today and how little time we have left to actually get to net zero in 2050 or get to a 50% cut in 2030 of greenhouse gases in total, we really need to move fast, and time is of essence. So what we think about this is, how can we do this in a way that's not only great for the people that we meet, but also are happening at the speed that can help us actually also achieve the Paris goals, because without achieving the Paris goals, there won't be a great future for our children.
Oh, absolutely. We are actually not inheriting it from our ancestors, but we are getting it from our future generation. Thank you so much for that, Per. Let me go across to Maktar now. You recently announced that IFC is partnering with the Rockefeller Foundation to de-risk private sector investments into distributed renewable energy. What is needed in order to achieve scale and impact in this sector today? And how is the IFC working with partners to expedite these essential projects?
So let me thank you so much, and let me tell you, I'm thrilled to be with Raj and Per. And Raj and I know each other for a while. We've been working together, and we've been really believing that partnership is what will change really the situation when it comes to energy. Both of us were on the public sector side. He was heading USAID. I was responsible for Africa at the World Bank. And we worked on an initiative which was Power Africa. And I think that we have fond memories, Raj and I, of the impact that we were able to make on the public sector. But what did we realize is that the public sector is just part of the equation. If you don't move the philanthropy of the private sector, you are not able to make the difference and the dent that you have. So when Raj came and with this initiative, I applauded with my 4 hands, if I may say, because it was something that really was needed to complement the conversation and bring it to COP26. We needed to make centrally the role of the private sector. But what I found particularly interesting in this initiative is that we're not talking only about large projects which will be going to the people who have less difficulty accessing clean energy, but it's aiming at tackling the challenges faced by people in the poorest area and the most remote area by developing initiatives that will bring a clean energy to the community. And that's a way we are building and winning the heart of people in the fight against climate change, particularly in emerging economies. So for me, this partnership is not only the $1 billion that Per and Raj are bringing, and which will allow us to leverage another $2 billion, but this is really for me what we are. I mean, when we talk about impact investing and really having an impact on global public goods.
That is great to know, Mr. Diop. Damila, let me come across to you now. You heard Raj, Per, Makhtar talking about the need for renewable energy, the need for a quick resolution to fight climate change. What are your comments and reflection on what they just spoke about?
Well, obviously, I'm really excited. I mean, my only role is to achieve SDG7. So hearing IKEA Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation committing to 1 billion is what we really need to change the game. It's also what we need to get governments and other institutions behind it, because it's going to leverage billions. And then hearing my dear friend Magda saying that the de-risking could also bring an opportunity for another 2 billion. As we know, as we talk today, it's not just about giving people the minimum levels of energy. Pierre said that it's energy so they can be economically viable, so they can also own their place in society and add to society. So, you know, I'm honored that these institutions are showing the force that it's needed to bring other partners along, because this is partnership at its true sense. I mean, these resources, I think, to put in perspective, would ensure the 760 million people who don't have access to energy today, of which 570 million of those happen to be in Africa, actually enjoy benefits to access to energy that is also productive. You know, increases GDP at a scale that we really underestimate in terms of the growth for countries. Obviously, personally, to me, it provides opportunities for women to earn 59% more than they were earning before. So when we talk about energy access, I actually like calling it energy development, because it's job creation, income creation, and also teaching us how to grow in basically a low carbon economy. It ensures the transition that we all need, and more importantly, it takes people out of energy poverty, which is critical that we think about planet and people as we move ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this very illuminating discussion to our panelists. But before we dive into the second discussion, we have a lot more lined up. So let's learn a bit more about how the Rockefeller Foundation is working to bring reliable, renewably powered electricity to communities around the world with distributed renewable energy technology. Take a look. Okay, then let's continue the discussion, and I would like to welcome again our special guests and dive deeper into this conversation. I would like to welcome them again. Thank you so much for joining us. Damilula, let me come to you now first. We've been talking about transformational partnerships, what private organizations across the globe are doing, but what problems and challenges are these new partnerships and investments working to overcome? And what role is each of your institutions playing to solve these challenges, specifically in the area of energy poverty? Please go ahead.
Okay, so I mentioned some of the few challenges in my previous, when I spoke previously, so I'm not going to go through that again. But one of the key things that SEforALL we're focusing on is creating the pathways to kind of sustainable clean energy, and understanding that this is truly about transition. You know, a lot of these economies have to totally transition into a cleaner way of doing this. So supporting them to understand the data that they need to do that is also critical. And, you know, we're working with a lot with IKEA and Rockefeller on these integrated energy plans, not just to know, you know, how much energy is used, but what is the best type of energy that actually gets people out of energy poverty. We're also working on, you know, the things we need to do to accelerate finance. We do realize in a lot of economies, some type of subsidy is needed, but a smart subsidy using results-based financing and only get payments after connections is what we are championing, again, with the partners I've mentioned through the Universal Energy Facility, which we're hoping is expected to grow to almost 500 million and put like 2.3 energy connections. It also sets the place on how we're going to deal with energy efficiency and a lot of these other things that we move towards the pathway. It's just really critical, and I think, you know, Magda said it really well, that the role of private sector is critical. You could have all the public sector money in the world, but if people are not encouraging private sector, and what I'm personally interested in, how we develop the local developers as well in a lot of these countries to also get ahead. So it's not just about providing power to the people who need it and leaving no one behind, but we're actually creating jobs and we're creating capacity for local developers to actually take up this clean energy challenge.
Oh, that's a brilliant point that you've made. It's not only about creating power, but also creating extra jobs. Magda, let me come to you now. Damilola did speak about need for finance. What problems and challenges do you think these partnerships would face? What is the role that IFC could play in something like this?
Now, let me just repeat really a point that Damilola has been making. Actually, in our community, she has been really one of the leaders on this point, which is talking about energy development. And when we think about energy, it's not about providing energy per se, but to make sure that it's used for production, for job creation. And I think that we have now an opportunity to do so. Well, in the video that was presented on Rockefeller, you saw how the local job can be created from bringing renewable energy. We'll be able to have a graduate leaving the capital cities and going to the rural areas, trying to maintain the PV solar that will be built there. You will see people who will be working in the construction. You will be seeing farmers, like I saw in Bangladesh, being able to use a solar pump to be able to irrigate their field and be able to create jobs. And that will have also a huge impact on gender inequality, because it will allow us to give more jobs for women and to move them out of activities which are really using the physical force to be able to do basic work. So how to do more of this? How to do more of this is to ensure that the regulatory framework is in place. That's what you have been doing for a while, but we need to accelerate it. We need to make sure that utilities are functioning well, that a legal framework allows people to set up some renewable energy production off-grid, so that people can, when the grid doesn't reach a place to be able to access electricity. We need to ensure adoption of technology to create a solution where technology adoption is accelerated and innovation. And we need to do more trade. As we can see, there are some countries which can produce energy much cheaper and who are not able to exploit their full potential. So moving towards more energy trade, particularly renewable, would be very, very important. So these are a few elements that we are working on, and we think that would be attracting private sector even more. To say that already we are seeing a lot of things on the Scaling Solar Initiative. We are already now 1,000 megawatt installed that IFC has been financing, and we are seeing it happening also in the wind space and in other type of renewable energy.
Okay, some very interesting points out there. Thank you so much for that. And important, of course, what kind of ground level execution that we see, that will be something that we should be watching out for. Raj, let me come across to you now. Both Damilola and Magda have spoken about the contribution from the private sector. The same question to you: what are the kind of problems and challenges that you foresee in these new partnerships, and what can Rockefeller do, especially in the area of energy poverty?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is getting to scale. And Mokhtar mentioned the work that we did together previously in a program called Power Africa, which was a public-private collaboration between the Obama administration and the World Bank and the and African countries. And I think what we learned was that large projects can take a long time and require the collaboration between governments, between developers, between financiers, and frankly, between those institutions that can take risk out of the projects to make them a bit more viable and attractive to everybody else. And, then Damilola has actually set the bar very high from her work in Nigeria, because she illustrated how if you focus on distributed renewable energy, you can perhaps move faster, get projects going and stood up quicker, launched a major collaboration with many of those same development partners, and demonstrated that this vision of using new renewable energy technology and distributed technology in particular can fill a gap that's been in the market, which is reaching communities that are not centrally connected to larger power production in these nations. And that is ultimately the path to ending energy poverty. So I think very much the answer to your question is our institutions coming together to solve the roadblocks that are along the way. Sometimes those are going to be getting finance into projects, and you have a lot of financial firepower aligned in this discussion alone to solve that problem. Sometimes it's having the access to technology and knowing the operators and developers and operating companies that can take this to significant scale. Again, we can do that more effectively together than we can apart. Sometimes it's working with governments and making sure that they allow more innovative new entrepreneurs to come in and provide and sell power to very low-income communities. And we have a track record of having done that in Ethiopia and India and Nigeria and elsewhere that we need to expand on. And sometimes, frankly, the challenge will just be technical. It's having smart meters and better batteries and new artificial intelligence systems to do remote energy management and reduce the cost structure of service provision. We have a single project with Tata Power in India that seeks to build 10,000 of these mini grids and serve 10 million people. And they estimate they'll get the cost of service through using these new technologies down to 15 cents a kilowatt hour. At that point, nothing is going to beat this vision of success in terms of connecting 1 billion people to the energy and power they need to move themselves out of poverty. So all the constraints are significant, but together, I think we've demonstrated we can overcome them. And this is an effort to take that to scale.
We definitely hope that happens sooner than later, Rajiv. Let me go across to Per now. We did speak about private partnerships. You have spoken in the past as well about the importance of collaboration. What do you think the challenges that one can face, and what can IKEA Foundation do? Something in the field of energy poverty.
Thank you, Sonal. Well, as Raj was outlining very elegantly, there's no one size fits all. There are different challenges in different countries, to different partners, there are different organizations, different regulations. And I think what this program can do is to bring all the different partners together, get everyone around the table and agree on a way forward. That's not only a good way forward for the people living in the poorest communities, but also a quick way forward. And that requires different challenges, but it requires a different type of ecosystem. And if you don't have the ecosystem, we won't be able to finance the programs. So developing the programs together with all parties and actually getting it started is something that this program aims to do. It's interesting when I've learned a lot from our partner, Selco in India, because we worked with them for a long time. And one of the interesting aspects when we discussed how to do this in India at large scale, we said, why can't we just build large solar power plants and feed the grid? And then they told me, well, the grid is not going to be able to take that. That's part of the reason why you have unreliable energy in many countries around the world, because the grid can't take it. So producing more renewable energy, putting into the grid is not going to do it. And that's why this distributed renewable energy system is so powerful, because you can bring it out there to people where people live, and you can produce it locally. And you can hook it up to the grid sometime in the future if this grid is there, but building out the grid takes a long time. The other part is to me that I learned a lot about is appliances. You know, we focus a lot of bringing energy to people, but we don't necessarily think about the fact that most appliances are developed for people in countries where energy is abundant. So rethinking how you develop energy appliances that are using less energy is absolutely crucial, so that also, let's say, the demand side is served in a way that they can actually afford. And finally, maybe there's a saying in my language that says that it's very expensive to be poor, and you know, many people could afford to pay for access to energy if they had some kind of a loan platform to actually pay it over time instead of having to pay it upfront. Upfront investments is high for renewable energy for individual households, but if you find a financing solution, you can establish that as part of the ecosystem. You can get energy to people living in poverty in so much faster because they will actually be able to pay for it. And when they're able to pay for it, we can scale it unlimited.
Pair. Some interesting points out there. So I would actually go back to some of the points that you made, and I'll come to you, Mr. Diop. They have spoken about how private partnerships are important and how different regions would need different kind of solutions, right, and different partnerships in different countries. But one challenge that everyone is facing is COVID. So do you think more resources will be required once we are over the COVID crisis? Do you think it'll be more expensive to switch to renewable source of energy? What kind of finance commitment or commitment from the global leaders would we need? We'll just connect. I think you'll have to unmute yourself, Mr. Diop. Could you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, I think, Magda, we have to unmute.
Yes. Okay. I think, okay. So let me come to you, Mr. Shah then. I'll come to you, then we'll go back to Mr. Diop then. Just generally, I wanted to understand, do you think we'll need more resources now that we already have COVID in place? Because most of the world resources are used to fight COVID. So do you think post-pandemic recovery will be slightly tougher than what we anticipated?
Well, let me just say, because I'm sure Mokhtar would have aligned with this thought, that the time to act is absolutely now. If you look at the level of investment that wealthier nations and industrial countries have made to recover from the COVID-19 crisis, it's been roughly 20 to 30% of GDP. The G7 just announced that they've committed $12 trillion to their own domestic recovery actions. When you compare that to what's happening in developing nations, it's closer to 2% of GDP. So there's a huge gap in resource availability to invest in a strong recovery. When you look at how you're going to solve that, we believe the solution has to be public-private. It has to be efforts like this one that's firmly invest in the needs of vulnerable communities and vulnerable families, that are building modern infrastructure so that those families and communities can connect and compete in a global economy, and that are doing it right now with urgency when funding is most urgent and most required. And our collaboration with the World Bank, with the IFC, with so many other partners is really a way to motivate filling that resource gap by collective action and doing it with urgency around a set of technologies and ideas that we think can lift 1 billion people out of poverty.
No, thank you very much. Sorry, I'm back on my online. I think that there is it's important to connect a few things that we have been working on in the past. The same with Raj work on Ebola crisis. At that time, what was the problem? A lot of places that you could not take a vaccine or a product because of the lack of electricity. We have today, when we're talking about the COVID-19 crisis, one of the big obstacles is a cold chain to be able to take some of the vaccine to the population we need to do that. So it's clear that rebuilding better in this context of COVID-19 will bring a lot of new ideas. In Rwanda, where we worked, one of the things that we are very impressed was the fact that you can use drone to send some blood to remote area. Yesterday, I saw that in Senegal, it started to be developed. So the importance of electricity and energy to be able to do all these things, which are rebuilding the world differently, but much better, because we'll be able to bring all those services that are currently not available to the poorest, is a tremendous opportunity. And I can only second what Raj said about the need to bring more resources from the private sector, to mobilize institutional investors, to use the resources that philanthropy is currently bringing to de-risk our investment, and we need to have collective action. Collective action requires what? Working together institutionally, but knowing each other. And I'm so glad that the three people that are here, we know each other well, and we have built this trust that allow us to leapfrog in terms of partnership and do things differently from traditional partnerships that we had in the past. We have an important date, COP26. There is a transition towards that. It will be important to, under the leadership of Damilola, who is really moving on that front, to continue having this conversation in preparation of COP26, so that we make sure that the message and what we're trying to do, this group, be replicated and repeated at much larger scale. I think we're getting 1 billion today. Let's aim for 2, 3, 4, 5 billions. And I know that Raj and Pierre can do it. I have no doubt about it.
Absolutely. We need, yes. Yes, please go ahead.
I was just saying I agree that we have to
Okay.
aim much higher, and that's, I think Per has made this point repeatedly, that the purpose of our initial 1 billion is to take some risk out of the system so that IFC can come in bigger and bolder as they have, so that so many other institutions can join this effort, and we can raise, at least 10 billion by Glasgow at the end of the year, and then much more afterwards for transformational projects that, allow Damilola to get her vision fully accomplished. So it is all of us working together.
Absolutely. As you pointed out, not traditional, but transformational partnerships that we are looking at. Thank you so much, all. You raised crucial points, and we heard you on the need to deliver sustainable energy for all as a development and climate change priority. Of course, if we are to achieve our climate change objectives, energy will have to be a key part of it. Before we deep dive into the last discussion of this very interesting side event, we have a video from International Finance Corporation. Let's take a look.
The International Finance Corporation Green Bond to go towards lending operations for climate projects such as energy efficiency, renewable energy, and resource efficiency.
I confirm.
Share, inspire, and lift. Such an interesting video from International Finance Corporation, and we saw that sustainable development is the way to go. Now I'm pleased to welcome back our guests, and once again, thank you for staying with us, and I hope you're enjoying these conversations. The next portion of the program will allow us to find out, while pivoting to climate change crisis, what is the link to energy access and what role do our panelists see the DFI's, governments, private sector playing to reduce emissions as we approach 2050. Per, let me start this one from you. We have spoken about the importance of private partnerships in our fight towards climate change. What is the stakeholders that you expect? What from the government? What from finance institutions? As a person who's on the private segment side.
Well, Sonal, we have discussed this with different angles already, but I think that the huge and specific role that we can play as a private sector, as a foundation, if you look at the foundation part of the private sector, is that we can take risk, as Raj was referring to. We can take big risks, and we can afford to fail. And from failing, we will learn how to do better next time, and it doesn't have the same consequences as for others. So. What we're going to do here is, on one hand, we're going to help develop the projects that can be financed and be executed upon, but we're also going to take some de-risking and make it attractive for more investors to come in, so we can scale this much further than otherwise would have been possible. So I think that's just an example of how different players and different partners have different specific roles to play. If I look at this from my perspective, I could say that I could put $500 million into building solar farms and solar parks for the poor somewhere in the global south, and that would have helped thousands, maybe millions of people. But it's nothing compared to what we can do together now. We bring all the partners together, and we can leverage the 1 billion and expect to get so much more out of that. So the beauty of this program is that we bring partners together. Everyone brings what they have in terms of specific expertise, knowledge, position, regulatory knowledge, and then we can do so much more, and we can do it faster. And I think that's the really important thing. It's not only about doing more, but it's about doing it faster, because we also need to look at the climate side of this and not only the energy side of it.
Oh, absolutely, fair. Damilola, let me come to you. What do you think is the link to energy access, and what role do you see the DFIs, governments, private sector playing to reduce emissions as we approach 2050?
Well, I think I'll start with the fact that the climate story is an energy access and energy development story to at least half the world. And sometimes that is left out. You know, we cannot achieve net zero by 2050 if we do not achieve sustainable energy for all by 2030. And this is essentially why the Secretary General convened the Summit Level Heads of State event in September, on 20th of September, which is known as the High Level Dialogue, which is to look at combining it. So it's not seen as energy as a subset of climate, but it's seen as energy access has to be achieved for climate to also be achieved. You know, we talk a lot about, you know, the roles of government, the roles of private sector, the roles of philanthropy, and I think this embodies what it's about. I've been on many calls as well, speaking to governments, because this is a huge task. You're asking governments who don't have that much money to basically electrify their economy. You know, it goes beyond just power supply to the poor. It's you know, transportation. It goes through everything, but trying to explain to them that this is the best way to do it, and for them to understand the gains as well. And that kind of starts with finance, right? So I'm really happy that Raj said 10 billion, you know, maybe 20 billion by COP. We never know, maybe 10 billion by high level dialogue. But what we definitely do know that these types of partnerships are key, and the speed and the scale of how this partnership came together not only helps the energy access story, but it's very, very key to the climate story. So I'm hoping, you know, the commitments of different countries of 100 billion every year towards climate, actually also a significant amount actually goes towards energy as well. And everybody comes together to join this platform because the scale and the speed is there and the commitments are there as well. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments, Damilola. Mr. Diop, let me come to you now. We did hear you earlier speaking about it as well, the need for private funding. But generally, if we speak about the contribution from different stakeholders, what role do you see DFIs and governments playing to reduce emissions as we approach 2050?
Let me say something very important for me. is trying to create economic opportunity without simultaneously addressing climate change is like trying to paddle a boat without an oar. It's possible, but we want to get very far. And I feel really this is what today, this crisis on climate change, this crisis on COVID-19 is telling us. It's telling us that the overall and the global economic development that we would like to have in our society requires that important segment of economies are developed. We need to ensure that people living in the Sahel have livelihoods there, so that they don't get in a boat to live. We want to ensure that people who are living in places where they have less opportunities can continue and working and serve their community. And that is for me, the hope that I'm seeing now is that we are all converging in the converging. You are seeing more and more in boards of companies, people talking about impact investing. You are seeing more and more the youth in the street telling us that we don't want to have a world which is polluted. We have policymakers which are fully committed and see the benefit of doing that. And I think that it has been converging much faster than we thought. And at this stage, the challenge that we all have is to make these all very strong interest and heightened interest to structure it and bring it to what we want to be, which is investing 10 billion in energy, improving people's life, and ensuring that we have access. That requires what? That we tear all walls. There is no possibility. There is not anymore a world where we have philanthropy here, IFIs here, private sector here, government. We need to tear all walls. We need to make sure that we are in the same room, that we challenge each other. We have ambitious targets, and I'm so glad that we can do it. And we can do it in this group because there is trust among us. And that trust, we need to expand it to the rest of the community, to be able to the donor community, to the private sector community, to the philanthropy, so that we are able to really make this big difference. And COP26 for me is an important step. We need to have these, what Damilola, what Per, what Raj are saying today, being heard loudly at COP26 so that we can create a much bigger movement.
Absolutely, more collaboration and not competition is what we are looking at. Rajiv, let me come to you now. What are your thoughts? You've heard everyone. What are the roles that you expect different stakeholders to have in this particular fight against climate change?
Well, urgency and scale are the things that we have to use as our guideposts here. I think we all work together. We all trust each other. We all know what needs to be done. And too often, progress has been slow. Just to put that in perspective, in 2009, at the Copenhagen COP negotiations, there was a climate commitment to provide $100 billion of financing for emerging economies to be able to green their energy systems and their economies overall. That was reaffirmed at the Paris COP. That was actually reaffirmed last week at the G7 summit. I mean, years and years and years go by and we keep reaffirming the same commitments. I think what's different here is this group has come together and said, we're willing to put our resources on the table right now to deliver results. And we're going to measure results in both the number of people who move out of energy poverty and the number of tons of carbon averted along that path. And, if I were to contrast that with what has happened in the past, this is much more about action and delivery of results with urgency and scale. And hopefully it moves the system from thinking that a COP negotiation and meeting is a place to go make verbal commitments to one that is seen as much more action-oriented and delivering actual outcomes. And then I'd say one last thing. It's important to deliver these outcomes in developing nations with urgency, because you cannot expect those nations to be a part of global climate agreements if there's no meaningful vision and path upward for the people that live in those countries. All these nations have observed industrial countries getting wealthier based on fossil fuels. And if we don't create a viable alternative path, that's well-financed and real and delivering results, we're not going to have total participation in a global climate agreement. And that is important for the future of our planet. So I think urgency and scale are the critical themes for us going forward. And we couldn't have a better set of partners and a better set of leaders that you've assembled here to work with to make it happen. Because these folks have heart, these folks know what it takes, and their institutions are aligned with their vision of success.
And we could not have had a better panel discussion. Thank you so much for all these brilliant comments. We'll just take a breather and we'll come back to you for your closing comments. Okay, so we've heard a whole lot of things. We've spoken to Damilola, Rajiv, Per, Maktar. Now let me come to you individually and tell us what was your takeaway from this brilliant discussion that we've had. What would your closing remarks be? Damilola, I'll not start with you actually. I'll come to you towards the end. Let me start with Per. What are your comments?
Well, my most important takeaway is built on what Raj said about the urgency and scale, and the fact that you can only achieve that if you build really strong relationships. Relationships are built when people come together, spend time, build trust and transparency, and all have skin in the game. And I think that's what we have here. We have a group of people who really want to do the same thing and try to do it fast. And I think if I look at what I've done in the foundation over the last 12 years, the most successful programs have been the programs where we brought together private sector organizations, NGOs, governments at local level, regional level, national level, sat around the table, decide what we want to do together, and we went ahead and did it. And I think that's what this is all about, is building that relationship. So when we talk about investing $1 billion, we're not only investing $1 billion, we're also investing a lot of our time and effort and passion to actually make energy available to as many people as possible in as short a time as possible. And I think this kind of radical or unprecedented collaboration is what it's going to take to get us there in time. You're on mute.
Tonight you're on mute.
My bad. I'm sorry. Maktar, let me come across to you now. What are your takeaways from this discussion?
I think that my colleagues have said it. I think that we are trying to emulate the partnership of today and tomorrow. A partnership where people can talk about issues because they have various experience. If Raj didn't have his experience in the public sector, maybe he would not be able to say what he's saying today from the foundation. If Per didn't have his experience, if Damilola didn't have, so the partnership of tomorrow is a partnership where people are bringing a set of experience to solve a problem. And the problem that we like to solve is to reduce poverty. We want to have less people poor. And we know that people will be poorer if the world is polluted, if there is more climate change. We know that people will be poorer if they don't have access to electricity. So we are here at the end of the day just to fight poverty. And we think that access to energy is one of the fastest ways to fight poverty.
Thank you, Maktar, for that. Rajiv, let me come across to you. What is your takeaway?
Well, I will agree with those comments and just remind us all that it's about urgency, scale, and if I were to add a third concept, results. That, I think people should be frustrated with the slow rate of progress we've seen, especially coming out of this COVID crisis, at a time when we should be dramatically accelerating public-private investment in developing and emerging economies. We're seeing the opposite happen at a time when we know the template for recovery, for an equitable recovery, requires bold action. We're seeing the opposite happen. And at a time when we should be getting vaccines out to the most vulnerable communities, we're seeing the opposite happen. So despite the best efforts, this program, this partnership, this initiative is designed to deliver results quickly, and deliver results that can move the needle on the global climate negotiations, on the resource mobilization required for an equitable recovery in emerging economies, and on the ultimate task of getting us back on track to end extreme poverty, to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, and to recognize that energy access is what ties it together. So I'm very hopeful and grateful to be with this group for this purpose, and thank you.
Thank you, Raji, for your comments. And last but not least, let me come across to Damilola. What have been your takeaway? You've been an advocate for sustainable energy for so long.
So first, I'd like to thank Raj, Per, and Makta. I mean, the issue of trust is really important, especially when you're dealing with energy or poverty. I mean, today already we've seen just how quickly we can move with, Rockefeller and IKEA saying 1 billion and Makta coming with 2 billion. We technically, for me, it's like 3 billion. But the experience of kind of true innovation and best solutions, I say this a lot, but people underestimate it. This energy development, energy access, whatever you're going to call it, is the difference between life and death for millions of people. So as we're doing this, as we're creating energy, you're actually saving lives. You're ensuring the poor woman sitting in Ethiopia, Rwanda, Pakistan, in rural environments also earns a decent living, also can know that if she's going to have a child, there will be decent healthcare for her and life-saving equipment to make sure it happens. Raj, put on the point in terms of the COVID response. Going into this, we knew only 24% of primary healthcare centers in Africa had electrification. We've known that for about 10 years, but it's still the case, right? And we say we want to have, global distribution of vaccines. It really just cannot happen, right? And I just want people to kind of bring it home that, when you invest in energy and you invest in the poorest people, you're actually saving their lives. And you're actually making sure that this transition story that we talk about is not only for the global north, but is felt in the global south and places that truly need it. So I'm so excited about the opportunities. I'm excited about everybody coming together, the high level dialogue, and more importantly at COP. But I guess for me, selfishly as well, I'm excited in terms of how this partnership is challenging other institutions to raise the bar and do more. So, I really look forward to kind of driving an ambition and I guess an energy revolution with all of you.
Damilola, Rajiv, Per, Maktar, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been my pleasure moderating this session. Very inspiring and a lot of interesting outcomes from here. All right, with that, we have in fact reached the end of our time together today. But just because the event is ending does not mean this is the end of your journey on energy. And I will encourage you to join the other important events happening this week during the Ministerial Thematic Forums. But I will above all encourage you to take action towards the upcoming high-level dialogue on energy, which will take place on 20th September 2021. This dialogue will be the first global gathering on energy under the auspices of the UN General Assembly convened since the UN Conference on New and Renewable Sources of Energy in 1981. Recognizing the urgent need for action, leaders from the United Nations, the private sector, national and local governments, youth and other organizations issued a joint call today for countries, businesses, cities and civil society groups to put forward their energy compacts to show how they will achieve the goal of clean, affordable energy for all by 2030 and net zero emissions by 2050. The energy compacts would provide the clearest indication of how countries will ensure that all people have access to clean energy and move towards net zero emissions. Please enjoy this explanatory call to action video.
Now is the time to be bold and ambitious.
At the high-level dialogue on energy in September, we can change course.
It's time to give access to electricity and all the opportunities that it brings to the nearly 800 million people who still live without it, and to start a green energy transition for everyone.
It's time for bold new partnerships to provide countries with the resources they need to enable a fair and just energy transition that leaves no one behind.
It's time for nations to fulfill their commitments under the Paris Agreement and make the transition we urgently need.
Let's all do our part by making an energy compact with voluntary commitments
to advance clean, affordable energy for all by 2030.
As we put the world on a path to reach net zero emissions by the middle of the century. I call upon all mayors around the world to join us in putting energy compact
to switch their cities over to clean energy.
Call on businesses to join us in making energy compact plans in line with the goals of the Paris Agreement.
To advance the productive use of renewable energy for all by 2030.
I call on organizations around the world to join us in making energy compact commitments.
To make clean electricity and cooking fuels affordable for all.
So I urge everyone involved to make ambitious energy compacts, to help bring the benefits of clean power to communities around the world whilst building a clean, green, resilient future for our planet.
I call on young people around the world to join us in making clean energy commitments.
And to hold our governments and others accountable for the future that they leave to us.
It's time.
It's time.
It's time.
It's time.
And it's time indeed. Once again, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to the amazing team of SEforALL, the Rockefeller Foundation, the IKEA Foundation, and the International Finance Corporation that made this event possible. Thank you to all the special guests who joined us today despite their busy schedule. And thank you to our sponsors, funders, and partners. And last but definitely not the least, thank you again to our lovely audience. I wish everyone a good afternoon and good night. Till we meet again.